My name is Shawn Harris. I'm a senior technical solutions engineer here at Cypress. And this means that I basically get to help our customers and internal teams understand how to get the most out of our software. That could include custom sessions for best practices with Cypress or providing internal training sessions for latest features. A little bit about me. I am a bootcamp grad. I attended in 2019, and I'm also a teaching assistant in my free time. And I'm also a cancer survivor. I got the pleasure of ringing the bell in 2021. I've been in remission since, so yay me. And honestly, I just want to go ahead and just start a couple of little fights here. I prefer I prefer tacos over pizza. There is nothing wrong with pizza, but when you have the choice of a good taco, it's gonna be tacos all day, right? I prefer dogs to cats. Cats are also cool, but dogs definitely align more with my active lifestyle. And I'm a morning person, not really a night person. This again just has more so to do with me just wanting to get things done earlier in the day, and nothing wrong with being a night owl though. And if you're looking for me on social media, you can find me on all the usual platforms with the username Conversation. So I will be the one that will be leading the first half of the session today. However, I am super excited to announce that joining me today are Denison, the Director of Quality Engineering at Bitovi, and also Ramona Schwering, a developer advocate at Auth0 by Okta. Both will have the opportunity to tell you more about themselves in just a little bit. In today's talk, we're going to cover what exactly is UX and QA, why are each of those topics important, how do the two overlap, and then after the presentation, Denison and Ramona will join me in a panel discussion, sharing their experiences and offering insights about how to apply UX and QA testing effectively in your projects. So before we get started, let's just make sure that we cover the basics. So what is UX and QA? I could definitely start off with a textbook explanation of each, but I think it'd be better if I just start off with questions that every single QA person and every UX person has ever said, probably more times than they can count. So for our lead QA engineer, Testy McTester, that question is, does it work as expected? I'm pretty sure I heard a few virtual laughs because even reading it, I laughed at it myself. And then for our lead UX researcher, that question is, what does the user want? Both of these are super valid questions, but the real question is, why are we asking these specific questions? For our QA folks, this is a basic example of the software developer lifecycle, or SDLC. And the overall gist is that whenever a new product or a new feature needs to be created, there's typically some type of planning, analysis, design, coding implementation, testing and deployment. And because tech is always evolving, there is always some type of maintenance. Your team's developer's lifecycle may look a little bit different. Maybe your team uses the shift left mentality. Maybe they use a Kanban or agile methodology. Or maybe your team just uses a more iterative process prior to the release. But essentially, QA is going to fall into this testing phase. So QA commonly stands for quality assurance, but you may also hear it referred to as quality analyst, automation tester, manual tester, and sometimes the person that's doing the testing is the software engineer who actually was writing the code themselves. But essentially, QA is just going to verify, does the product do what it's expected to do? And they're also going to do their best to confirm that any changes or updates to the app possibly cause any unintended regressions. This can mean verifying the functional portion of your app, such as, does it work on different operating systems? Or does it work across different browsers? Or you might be using some type of metric score like Lighthouse to evaluate the quality of your app. If you're unfamiliar with what Lighthouse is, don't worry, we're actually going to cover that more in depth shortly. On the other hand, most UX teams are actually not using the developer lifecycle. they're using what's called the double diamond. And the overall concept of UX or user experience is it can be easily misconstrued sometimes. So it's not that it means a user wants a feature, so let's advocate for that feature. Sometimes a user uses a product in an unexpected way. So instead, it's more about first understanding what is the actual problem and then advocating for the best solution through research and validation. Also, UX isn't just about design. Depending on who you talk to, user experience can typically be separated into design, research, or product, and sometimes it's some type of combination like product research. But essentially, the question of what does the user want starts with a generic problem or an area of friction. The UX team will then do their own form of testing, which I think is actually important to point out that this is different from QA testing. The UX team needs to validate why there's a need to improve the user experience. And they do this with customer interviews or tools like Pindo or Full Story. From those interviews, they can take all of that user feedback and then compile it and then narrow that down to create the specific problem, or sometimes it's referred to as like the problem statement. Once they have an actual understanding of what the actual problem is, the UX team can then create several options for solutions before narrowing down what the specific solution is. And they could do this by using maybe some A/B testing, or they could be using prototypes. So here you have a layout of a two-story house. I would love to see in the chat if you could just let me know what you think. Logically, does this house work as expected? And do you think this is what the user wants? Honestly, if this were my house, I would 100% have like a huge backyard for like my dogs to run around. I don't have any dogs yet, but when I get dogs, there's gonna be like this huge space in the backyard for them. But this house is actually not mine. This is actually going to be for a newly married couple and their elderly in-laws. So as you can see, this is a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. For some reason, the kitchen is upstairs. That is certainly a bit different. The main entry to the house is in the bathroom. That is certainly uncommon, to say the least. And I do not see a way to get to the second floor. So, taking those two questions in mind, how does this layout affect our user, who in this case will be the McDweller family? Let's examine this from the perspective of a QA and a UX specialist to see how each plays a critical role. We'll start with QA testing. And if our QA team wanted to do some type of testing on the McDweller home, they would typically ask some type of true-false questions. So, is there a door and are there windows? Is there a bathroom? And is there access to the second floor? Our first test is true. We have a door and we have windows. Our second test is also true. We have a bathroom. But our third test is false. There is currently no option to get to the second floor. It's pretty obvious that this affects the overall functionality of the intended user. And in this case, the house works as expected in most scenarios, but not all. Not having access to the second floor would be the equivalent of not having access to an entire portion of your application. So Testy McTester, our lead QA engineer, he's found a bug. Or maybe he's found an unintended feature. We don't know, right? But regardless of whether it is a bug or a feature, this was not the expected behavior. And if this had been presented to the McDweller family, this could have been a disaster. Luckily for us, though, we have an amazing QA team and they swooped in to save the day. But what about the UX perspective? Our QA team has already identified an obvious pain point. So why not just fix it? What exactly is the value add of user experience in this specific instance? So same house, same questions. But this time, we're actually going to focus on the user's experience. How do they feel? So unlike with QA testing, UX doesn't typically ask true-false questions because that can actually be misleading. Instead, they may do something like a user interview, and this will allow the user to openly express their pain points as they navigate through the project. So going back to our original questions, instead of is there a door and are there windows, from our customer interview, our user expresses the pain point of the door not being wide enough for their in-laws who will be living with them and need wheelchair access. The second question, is there a bathroom? And here, our user expressed their frustration with forcing all their guests to go through not just the bathroom, but also through the main bedroom to get access to the remainder of the home. And then our final question was, is there a way to navigate to the second floor? We've already established that there's a lack of access to the second floor. And so this is a major pain point. And unfortunately, Yuzi McUser, our lead UX researcher, she doesn't see this as a unintended feature. So in this scenario, the UX team has uncovered an accessibility concern, a user flow that's not ideal, and an area that is inoperable. So what does all of this mean? How do UX and QA intersect? Or more importantly, why should you care? So from a QA perspective, test 1 and 2 passed, right? We have a door and windows, we have a bathroom, but test 3 fails due to lack of access to the second floor. But with the added information from our UX team, leadership can now see the full picture. Yes, there is a door and there's windows. However, the in-laws are facing an accessibility issue with the front door not being wheelchair accessible. We also have a bathroom present, but the traffic flow is not ideal. I mean, technically, again, this does pass our QA test, but this is a huge yellow flag for our user experience. And then finally, there's just no access to the second floor at all. They can't even access the kitchen. And although it's possible, maybe the entire family doesn't care about the kitchen, maybe they want to eat out every day, but I'm pretty sure that's not ideal. With this added context, though, it has been determined that although there are quite a few pain points in this property, the inability to access the second floor is the most urgent pain point. So how could we access the second floor? Stairs definitely make sense, right? I mean, now we can access the second floor, and now all of our QA tests are passing. But again, remember that our UX team has provided the user feedback of needing wheelchair access. So are the stairs still the best option? Again, all of our QA tests have passed, but unfortunately, the stairs would still lack wheelchair access. So maybe there's a different option. Maybe the elevator would be a better option. This would allow access to the second floor and will also allow our in-laws who use wheelchairs to also access the second floor. This is the ideal user experience to access the second floor for this specific use case. That being said, it doesn't mean that this option, in our case, elevator, is always the best option for every use case. But working together, the QA team and the UX teams were able to prioritize the biggest pain point. So 1, they were able to prioritize the biggest pain point. 2, they were able to use the user feedback to determine the actual problem. And then 3, they were able to create the best solution that answers both questions. Does it work as expected? And is it what the user wants? In this case, I would actually dare to say that this is what the user needs. So for at least one pain point, the answer to both of those questions is yes. And considering leadership has actually determined that accessibility is a priority, there's also a good chance that the width of the door might also be revisited as well, meaning we could also resolve 2 pain points. This doesn't resolve the location of where the door is in the bathroom, but maybe that's a discussion for another day. So at the end of the day, what does this mean for you and for your team? First, you have happy users, right? So I know that there's literally no way to make every user happy, but a happy user can take you a long way in more ways than one. It's not just about, does it technically work? their experience when they're using the product also matters. The second one is saving time and money. In our example, the stairs would have worked, but it would have been twice the amount of time and effort. First for building and dismantling the stairs, and then for building the elevator. And then our third option was keeping users around. When a product is easy to use, easy to understand, and addresses the pain points of their base audience, those users tend to stick around. And then finally, boosting the brand. When users feel heard and the product works as expected, even after an upgrade, that builds trust and loyalty with your brand. So now that we've actually covered some theoreticals, let's pivot to some real world narratives. At this point, I'm thrilled to bring in both Ramona and Denison to the convo and give some fun facts about them before they actually have the opportunity to introduce themselves. So up first, we have Denison Luz, one of Cypress's newest ambassadors. And a few fun facts about Denison is he's actually good with only 4 hours of sleep each night, and he watches the sunrise every single day. I'm a little jealous of this one. His office is basically any beach in Brazil that has Wi-Fi. And also, he loves both cats and dogs, but he actually used to just be a dogs only person. And then finally, he loves to eat uncooked pasta. Is there anything that you would like to add about yourself, Denison?
Just thank you very much for having me here. But yeah, I think that's pretty much summed up all of my fun facts. Yeah, that's a good start.
Absolutely great. That was great. We're so happy to have you here today, Denison. And then up next, we have Ramona Schwering, one of our OG Cypress ambassadors. A few fun facts about Ramona are she actually used to be a lifeguard, and she had a living Pokedex up until the latest Pokemon edition. I thought that was pretty cool. And then she has also lived in three different countries. And if you didn't know, Ramona has been both a tester and a developer. Oh, and one of the coolest things is that she actually draws her own slides. I don't have the goal to do that, so I 100% give you all the props for that. Ramona, please tell us if you have any more cool things to tell us about yourself.
Thanks. So, hello everyone. So glad to see you. Even if I cannot see you technically through the camera, I know you're there. And yeah, you will see my slides a little bit later, a little bit, at least a little bit. And just wait for flags. I'm a cat person, I'm a night person, and I'm a pizza person. So yeah, I need to raise a pizza flag. So hopefully, some people from the audience did the same, so I don't feel that alone.
I'm pretty sure it's going down in the chat where people are not happy with my taco choice, but they just haven't had great tacos. That's all. Don't worry, Ramona. When we meet in person, I will provide you some great tacos. Denison, you're
Oh
invited as
yeah.
well. You can have some great tacos too.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. And my first question is actually for Denison. So, Denison, from your experience, what are some common pitfalls that teams face when they don't effectively integrate user experience considerations and QA testing?
I think from my experience, I believe that there are many pitfalls, but I think the most important one is about delivery. Like when we talk about the software development life cycle, everybody wants to deliver something good, but also something fast. And just if you don't take in consideration UX and you need to redo whatever work you have done before, that means you're going to have delays and you're going to miss deadlines. So I think that's the most common pitfall is that if you don't give the UX the importance they deserve, first you're going to upset a lot of people because UX they are human too. They have a heart, so we should take care of them. Because in the end of the day, it's interesting that I used to be a developer, front end developer, and everybody thinks that their position or their job is the most important one. So if you're a developer, you only think about development. If you're a tester, you only think about the tester. If you are UX, you only think about pixels, and that kind of thing. So we need to bring those people together since the beginning and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And if you make the UX part of the whole what we call, and Jennifer talked about in the keynotes, the definition of done. Make sure that when the task complete, the UX is being checked and is being the requirements from UX has been matched. I think that's the way to avoid this delay in redoing all this work. So I think the most common pitfall would be like the delivery, the delay of the delivery that it can cause.
Well said, well said. And you are 100% spot on. We certainly all believe that our job is most important. So I like what you said there. Um, Ramona, so in my presentation, I briefly mentioned Lighthouse earlier, but for
Yes.
those that are unfamiliar, could you explain what Lighthouse is and its role in the QA landscape?
Of course, of course. So let's start with the local application of Lighthouse. I don't know if you already used some developer tools in your browsers to debug applications, maybe in Cypress, maybe outside, but Lighthouse is a little tool which is hidden inside of the Chrome DevTools. So at the spot where you take a look at maybe some elements, see which select what I have, some network requests, there's, I guess it's called audit or something like that. So there's a little tab you can click, and in it there's the Lighthouse application, which will measure some metrics of your page. That could be SEO, that could be best practices, performance, web performance, inside of the web vitals maybe, but also when it comes to accessibility. And there it will get pretty handy when it comes to our quality assurance process, because we can take a look if our application performs good, if it gets worse or better. And I guess all scores, like it's from 0 to 100, all scores above 90 are great. So you can be satisfied with yourself. Even if you want to hit the 100, that's totally fine if you want to. But anything in between 50 and 19 might be some chance of improvement. And if you are below 50, maybe you should consider rewriting a little bit, some parts or something like that. So this is basically if you debug locally, but of course you could integrate it into Cypress tests too. Maybe we can take a look at the data.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So I noticed that you mentioned like a couple of scores. And so, how often does an all green Lighthouse score correlate directly with a good user experience?
Well, that's a good question. I would put it like that. So, of course, it will save you from the biggest mistakes or biggest pitfalls you could have, or some give you some advice what to improve. However, it's still a tool, right? So it wouldn't replace the human eye when it comes, for example, to contrast. You should still take a look that you use semantic HTML, that you try to use alt text, just to mention some low-hanging fruits. So, and it wouldn't replace a human, but still it can keep you away from those routine tasks and let you focus on the more important stuff, like much automation is doing.
Nice, nice. Also, well said. So, Denison, excuse me, Denison, are there any specific best practices or methodologies that you'd recommend based on your past challenges?
Yes, I'm just kind of reading the chat as well and seeing the comments here. And there is one, the really interesting one. I just want to bring it up. Gonzalo Franzosi, hope I said it right. But he said something about reactive approach. So instead of having a reactive approach, that's something that went wrong and then you have to fix it. What we need to include is that UX into the planning. And I know that we can react to, like, as a developer, sometimes we have to do proof of concept, right? We need to build something or an MVP, a minimum viable product. And it doesn't really matter what's the color of the background, or the size of the buttons, whatever, we just make it work. But then you have to have a reactive approach. You need to go back to the UX. UX have to review it and see, oh, that's exactly, that button needs to be a little bigger. The background, I can't read well the words. So that's a reactive approach. If you would change that and go back to that definition of done and include the UX and the requirements and make the UX as part of the whole planning from the start, that's one way to avoid all these kind of pitfalls or work delays or things that we need to do it again. So again, I think this comment that he did here in the chat about the reactive approach and create a kind of a planning strategy and make sure the UX is considered from the beginning. I think that's one big difference and a great approach of things.
Heard. Proactive versus reactive approach. Well said. Well said. So, Ramona, you mentioned something about possibly showing us some cool Lighthouse stuff. So, how
Sure.
can automated testing tools help teams prioritize aspects like semantics, accessibility, and mobile performance in real world applications?
So, if you want to automate all of those stuff and just try to focus on the most important things, there's a plugin handling Lighthouse scores or Poly scores if you want to like use them too for you. I will focus on Lighthouse, but if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen because I have some little slide from a previous talk, so we could maybe take a look together.
Absolutely.
So, let's pray that it's working. I did some small recordings just to give a little disclaimer before because I want to save you from NPM download times and some Copilot to give you the space to ask questions later on. So please don't blame me for that. If you don't see my keynote now, just send help. Otherwise, I will go into full screen mode. So yeah, I needed. Oh, it's maybe the wrong one. Can you see the lighthouse doodle?
Yes.
We can.
Perfect. Because yeah, of course, if I'm using images, I need to have some speakers notes, of course. So yeah, this is a little attempt of me of drawing the lighthouse logo. So yeah, it's checking how your application performs via Chrome DevTools. And you can automate this by using your CY provider. It's easiest to go with GitHub Actions if you want to. But yeah, using your end-to-end test you already have to take a little, yeah, to keep track of your Lighthouse scores is actually a really time-efficient way of at least having a constant view on your Lighthouse thresholds. So as said, there's a little plugin which is called Cypress Audit you can use, and this little QR code should point you to the GitHub page or something, so you can take a look at it later on. But I guess I can share at least the full slide deck, even if it contains a little more than just Lighthouse, but maybe it's still pretty interesting for you afterwards. Okay, get back to the show. Cypress Audit plugin. It provides you Lighthouse and Poly audits. And yeah, let's see how easy we can build it, like how we can be integrated pipelines. And it's actually quite easy because it's a typical Cypress installation. So you can use npm or your package manager of your choice to install it. And afterwards, we need some small server configuration, which we will do in the Cypress config.js, and use some node hooks to get them going. At first, I want to import Lighthouse and the prepared audit things from the plugin because we need it to function properly. And it's the normal import we are required actually. Then we will go to the node events. But first need to be, I guess, on before launch or on browser launch. I think, let me quickly think. Yeah, before browser launch. So before we start running the test in the browser, we will give people an opportunity to pass in launch options if we want to do some configs in it. And last but not least, we need the task one, which is most important because it includes the Cypress functionality, the Lighthouse functionality as a task. And that's, at least when it comes to the normal configuration, that's all we need. Then let's go further and basically make Cypress aware that we're using Lighthouse commands. And that's basically, as you know it from many plugins, you will import the Lighthouse commands to the command.js. If you're using JavaScript, the TypeScript is the same. So let me hopefully act if I would type pretty quick. And there we go. And when we want to use it inside of our tests now, it's only one command to use. It's this cy.lighthouse. We can pass in some thresholds if we want to take some configurations, but for now we will go with the defaults. And then we are ready to start some Lighthouse tests by using a normal Cypress test. So let's open the test inside of Chrome, find it, It's audit example. It really doesn't do anything really interesting besides running Lighthouse course. And of course, now you will see some flickering, some tabs open, some stuff which happens in your browser too if you're running Lighthouse audit. So this is completely normal, even if it looks a little creepy right now. So, and there we are. So the test is failing when it comes to the example page, which is by purpose to let you know that it will fail and it will block your application's merge pipeline or whatever you want to intend with your test because the thresholds are not met. So, for example, the accessibility record is at 77 and it's below the 100 threshold. Like we are using the default here, which is bad because we want to have it perfect, of course, because we will have the best opportunity to have the best performance. So, okay, if we take a look at the log of Cypress.io, okay, there's the log space. So, as you know it, when it comes to Cypress tests, here's the result. And at all possible points inside of the log, all thresholds will be hidden. And yes, leads us basically to typical Lighthouse metrics. Okay, I guess that's it when it comes to the slide deck. I hope it was good to have a little more like insights when it comes to like applying Cypress audit to your own test automation, and it's not that scary as you might think.
Nice. That was really really nice.
Mhm.
Um, it's one of those
May
things
I
where go
may
ahead.
I take a look at the chat right now because Holly is asking, can you set the threshold to 100%? Of course you can. So inside of the test, let me quickly check. I'm sorry if I interrupt, but it was just
No,
really
no, go ahead.
filling here. And I'm not sure it's like in the recording, but in your test itself, like the CY Lighthouse command, there you can pass into some arguments, and there you can, for example, use other thresholds if you want to. Sorry.
No, no, no need to apologize at all. That was perfect. Sorry, I get excited whenever I get to see these, and so I'm like, oh, I'm like, let me do it now. Let me figure it out now. For those of you all that don't know, there are some in the resources tab. Ramona has added the Cypress Audit plugin as one of the resources, so that is available for you. I just wanted to say I thought that was like a really cool demo. Of course, we got to see your amazing slides, but also I just love being able to see like a real world example of how you purposely made it fail, so that we could see uh, what that actually looked like. I did just have one more question for Denison before we move into the Q&A portion. And so, Denison, can you um, tell me about the implications of neglecting UX or testing of the application, and what consequences could that have?
There are many. Just gonna mention few, but that comes to mind. But let's just say user experience overall can be impacted because, as your example about the house, right? So you have the house has a window, has a door, but how wide is the door? How big is the door? Does it have stairs? So sometimes, as a developer, we have this kind of a really logical and straight to the point mindset that we did that check, we had the door, we had this and that, but does it really fits the requirements? Is that is the right size? Is that in the right position? So this can impact the user experience. But also, if you think about the stakeholders, the people that are putting money in your project, that they are paying that project, they if you have this work redone all the time because you're missing UX requirements, that can impact negatively your credibility, right? Just imagine you're a part of a project and this work that needs to be done has been done 2 or 3 times just because the UX was not involved in the whole part of things. And if you think about it, and I'm really glad that Ramona brought kind of the tech side of things, the whole Lighthouse accessibility, but on the other side it has the managing people and strategy side, like how these people are going to talk and work together to make sure that those requirements are not missing. Because even if we have a great tech and everybody's really good developers or testers, if you're not talking and make sure that we are on the same page about the requirements, we're going to miss those things and we're going to have delays, and this is going to impact the whole project. So also this can impact the credibility. If you need funding for your project or for whatever you're doing, this can also go in a different way.